Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I hope you're looking forward to another live broadcast of the Kev Baker Show right here on your number one network, Truth Frequency Radio, TFRlive.com. We're going all the way around the world, from America to Australia and just about everywhere in between. Thanks to Truth Frequency Radio, TFRlive.com, where we give you protection from deception, where silence is consent. And today we've got one of our regular guests back riding shotgun in the hot seat with me. It's going to be a great show. I always know it's going to be a great show because today's guest is somebody who thinks along very similar lines as I do, gets into very similar topics. And for me, he's one of the most prolific researchers and speakers on the UK's alternative information circuit. Yes, indeed. It's Ben Emlyn-Jones. He is the hospital porter that is against the New World Order. And for people who don't know, like I say, Ben Emlyn-Jones, former hospital porter and independent journalist who, over the course of his life, has come to realise that subjects most people laugh at, like UFOs, the paranormal, the government cover-ups, they're not jokes. They are, in fact, real. Not only are they real, they're the most important issues affecting the world today, and that means it affects you out there, folks. So gaining an understanding of how the world works has been a necessity to Ben. And Ben is also the author of the books called Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure, and that is the first in a trilogy of books. There's 2 sequels as well. If that isn't enough, he also writes on the Hospital Porters Against the New World Order blog and has a column in UFO Truth magazine. And not only that, he is fresh from being on Conference Walkabout. That's right, folks. It's Ben Emlyn-Jones. He's here. He's live. How you doing, Ben?
Kev, how are you? It's good to be back on the show.
It's great to have you. It's great to have you, Ben. Now, we usually launch into what is a very informative, very fun show. However, today we're going to open up with a few words about something that you've had to go through just recently with somebody that's very close to you. So, Ben, I'd like you to kind of let the audience know why you're not quite your bubbly self today, in case anyone hasn't been keeping up with this story.
Well, I'll do my best, Kev, as always. But I'm sure a lot of people know this, and a lot of people are very sad about this as well. Gareth Davis has passed away. Gareth Davis was similar to you and me. He was a broadcaster in the realm of woo-woo and things like that, conspiratorial, paranormal, UFOs, things like that. And he ran Mindset Central, which was his station, from which he broadcast the Mindset podcast, Paratalk Radio, and several other shows. And he died very suddenly last week, and this was a terrible shock for everyone, of course, including his family, who have my deepest condolences. We in this little community of ours have really been struck dumb by what's happened, and we're going to miss him very much. I myself was a regular contributor to his programs, and I'm going to miss very much his company online as we basically do what I do with you. And I met him a few times as well. He lives in Los Angeles, USA, but he traveled here quite regularly. He comes from South Wales, and so he traveled here regularly. I met him a few times. I'm going to miss him very much. It's been very, very sad.
And I think that was when I heard one of your videos, you were walking to work. And you were saying how this became like almost like a part of your Sunday routine, right? Because you would come home from work, you had maybe an hour to spare, and Gareth was getting up in the middle of the night, right?
Yeah, it's about 6 a.m. where he was. So he was like really, sometimes it was dark sometimes of the year. And he's so dedicated. Every Sunday morning he'd be up really early to do his show. And it became a part of my social life. I mean, Gareth, it's great to talk to people like I do to yourself, and because I can't talk to anyone in my own life here where I live in Oxford about the kind of things we talk about, but I can talk to you about it. Gareth, I was another of these people that I talked to regularly. In fact, it was at least twice a week I used to be on his show to do something. We record the Mindset podcast, do one of his live streams on YouTube, and it became like I was a friend that you'd meet in the real world, except I could talk about things I really, really wanted to talk about, and so could he. And now that's all gone. It's quite a blow. It's because now, although I've got yourself, of course, to talk to, it's not like we speak about once a month, don't we?
Yeah.
Just slightly more rare.
It's not the same as that every week thing. And Gareth was obviously somebody very dedicated to what he does, and I think today we should dedicate this show to Gareth and the Mindset podcast.
Thanks.
And I just thank you, Ben, for still turning up today. I'd have totally understood if you had wanted to take a day off, but we were talking before the show, and I don't really think about this too often, but you have to be really dedicated, whether you're a Gareth, whether you're a Ben. The work, the hours that you put into to bringing information to people, sometimes it's kind of lost on us. Are you a bit like that as well? Do you ever sit down and think about just how much time you're putting into this?
I do sometimes, yes. It's really all I do when I'm not at work. It's kind of my whole life, really. I mean, when I'm at work, even when I'm at work, I'm lucky I have one of those jobs where I can put earphones in my ears and listen to audio while I'm at work. And so I always put on a radio show. Sometimes it's even one of yours. I'll rip the audio and play it while I'm at work. It's really all I do. It's something I dedicate my life to. And as you know, there's what you get out of it in terms of conventional status, zero. Financial gain, very rare. Although I sell books occasionally, of course, but I don't sell as many as some authors who are better known than me. It astonishes me that the skeptics think this is some big money-making scam for people who just are lazy and can't be bothered to get proper jobs and things like that. It's utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. Firstly, people like myself and you and Gareth do have proper jobs, although I know sometimes you can be ill and not work.
Yeah, but, unfortunately, I'm off the workforce. But like you say, though, now you're working, Gareth working as well, and you think about the hours that you put into this. We were kind of joking before the show as well. We were laughing. We were saying we're either dedicated or totally insane, right? Totally insane. But like you say, I don't think anyone doing this is doing it to get rich. Although there are some definite grifters and con artists out there. I think we're just kind of dedicated to this information, this kind of quest to answer questions that are out there.
Yeah.
Doesn't make us any better than any other person who's maybe not into these topics. It's just who we are, And
exactly, yes.
Yeah, and the internet for me, like you said as well, Ben, I'm kind of lucky because I've got Anne and Kevin here, and they keep me very grounded. They provide me with a lot of balance. But I'd be lost without my online family as well. Yourself, Charlie Robinson, Jimmy Jeans, Joe, Scotty, Nacy, the regular people I have around the show, but more on from that, since we've had Discord as well, it's like a bigger extended kind of network of people where we can talk about all of these topics. Because like you say, there's not many people I could go to in the physical world and talk about all the stuff we talk about without the other person either falling asleep or running away.
I know, that's it. I mean, there was a handful of people here in Oxford. There's the lady I mentioned in my video who runs a shop here in Oxford it's the only shop in Oxford that sells fluoride-free toothpaste. And so I always go in there, and she's very much on my wavelength. But really, apart from that, it's a very, very small number of people. Although I have started a meetup group called Dreaming Sources, which is to be basically a kind of social gathering for local people who are into this kind of thing. And we were going to actually have our first inaugural get-together before Gareth died and that threw everything head over heels. But Dreaming Sources will be getting together, so I'll get the chance to meet some people in the local area who are on my sort of wavelength, including the lady in the shop I told you about. And then it'll be fun, I think, to have that kind of network. It'll be fun. We may have regular meetings, even like hire rooms and get guest speakers in and things like that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, dude. That's pretty cool. Now, one story I would like to throw in here, and again, it's more bad news from the world of ufology this time. I noticed you had covered this. Now, I hadn't really covered it at the time because I never really covered Paul Hellier's information when he was alive. So I thought, well, I shouldn't really go and create content now the man's passed. But don't really cover the guy. But I know it's somebody that you did cover, and it's somebody who had one of the most interesting pieces of the UFO jigsaw puzzle, because this was a guy who came from very high corridors of power, wasn't it? And again, we've recently lost him, right?
Yeah, Paul Hellier, he passed away at the grand old age of 98. His bio is incredible. I mean, apart from Sir Eric Gairy, the Prime Minister of Grenada, who we talked on a previous show about, he has to be one of the most senior people politically who's ever spoken out publicly about UFOs and about the reality of UFOs. This is a guy, like I said, he was 98. He was a career politician. In fact, he was the longest-serving member of the Queen's Council in Canada, which is the most senior chamber in the Canadian government. He was an engineer. He built aircraft during World War II. He did several jobs in government. He was Minister for Defence of Canada. This is really strange. He actually built a UFO landing pad in the 60s at one point. It's quite amazing. And he wrote several books about politics and several other things like that. And he was very widely respected. Therefore, I find it quite strange that apart from people within the UFO world, no one really has marked his departure from this planet. Normally, when someone in his position dies, there will be op-eds and obituaries in the newspapers, in the mainstream papers. There'd be the Conrad Black's papers in Canada would all cover it. There'd be some journalists would come in and do a big piece on him, a big send-off. They'd probably even draft one, knowing that he's quite old. They'd probably even draft one beforehand, like I did with James Randi. There's been nothing, Kev, not a word from the mainstream media about this very senior political figure from Canada dying. It's really quite something. It seems almost suspicious. I mean, I don't necessarily think there's a conspiracy. They've ignored his death because he's into UFOs, but I can't help wondering. This is a guy who's quite unequivocal in his opinions. He said, I've looked at it, I've looked at the evidence. UFOs are as real as the aircraft that fly above our heads. This is a guy who, at the age of in his 90s, started touring. He was going to write a book about UFOs. He spoke at conferences. I don't know if he ever finished his book. It may be finished and come out. I don't know. But he was a good guy. He absolutely didn't care what anyone thought of him. He said all kinds of things, also about 9/11 and things like that. He was outspoken about that. He mentioned the Illuminati. I think it's bad that he hasn't been recognized officially for what he's done. But I'll tell you what, we in the UFO community certainly have. I think we can say that safely.
I would imagine the reason they haven't, like you say, there should have been more coverage of this from a mainstream. It's a politician that held high office. And I imagine, just speculation, but you start writing obituaries for him and maybe introduce a whole new audience. People had never heard of this guy. Go and Google who he is, and like you say, boom, sent right down the UFO rabbit hole. So perhaps his outspoken life later in life, when he was talking about this stuff, maybe that affected it, how he got remembered. That's the only thing I can think of, Ben, because like you say, normally this would be covered, right?
Yeah, you'd think so.
Yeah.
I do think that this has to be a factor. It has to be his opinions. I think may have blacklisted him despite his senior position. I mean, if you think about what he had to deal with, I think if during his career, probably he had to deal with a lot of classified information that he's actually never been allowed to talk about. But this could have related, for example, to the Shag Harbor incident. Canada has its own fair share of UFO stories. With Shag Harbor, for example, is in Nova Scotia on the eastern coast of Canada. And I think was it 1973? Something very odd happened there. A craft came down into the sea and was actually, so it was a UFO that became a USO, an unidentified submerged object. And the Navy the Royal Canadian Navy came and they blockaded the harbour. They sent in divers. They sent in scanners, all kinds of things like that. Was it 67 it happened? Yeah, it was a long time. It was a while ago, but this was while in 4th of October 1967. This would have been when Hellier was in government. He'd have had to deal with this. Now, having looked at this and listened to the witness testimony, the fact it's still around now, I think this is a very, very significant UFO event. This was a craft that landed in the sea. It wasn't in the middle of the ocean. This was near the coast. And lots of people saw it. Fishermen saw it from the local area. People on the beach, people in the nearby villages, they saw it. It's really quite amazing. These aren't sophisticated people who make up hoaxes. These are I've listened to them talking. They're quite simple people. They actually speak with a weird accent that's a little bit Scottish, actually. So
yeah,
if you
I've
listen
been
to
to
them
Nova
talking,
Scotia, spent a night in Halifax on the way to America, and then on the way back again. You know, it's quite interesting. There's a military installation, a base on a small island just off Halifax. I'm trying to remember the name of it. And that's where we actually touched down. I was thinking about Canada in general when I was getting ready for today's show. You know, you think about the land mass, the area of Canada, but not as densely populated as somewhere like the US. Now, you've mentioned one instance there, this Shag Harbor UFO incident. Makes you wonder how much stuff is not being seen somewhere like Canada, right? Because you see North America, lots of UFO activity, but for me, Ben, and maybe you've got a different experience here, but I don't see too many reports coming from Canada.
No, the Shag Harbor one is one of the significant ones, I think. Yeah. But Canada, as you say, is in terms of its surface area, its size, it's second only to Russia in terms of its size. Yep. It's a huge country, but its population is pretty low. The people, most of it is completely uninhabited. I mean, there's I don't know exactly what the population is. Is it 20-something million?
37.59, and that was in 2019.
37.59 million, right? That's probably about half of what we have in Britain, but we're dealing with a country of millions of square miles. Yeah. And a lot of it is isolated. I mean, the people that talk to you are probably the Indians, because they live in the Aboriginal or First Nation people, as they call them, who live in the more remote areas, because they've been encountering strange phenomena throughout history and beforehand. This is related to things like Bigfoot as well and things like that. But it is possibly the lack of a population, its low population density, maybe is why there are fewer reports from the United States, which is a smaller country by area that has a much, much bigger population.
Yeah. Interesting stuff, man. Interesting stuff. So what's been happening on the whole UFO front when you've been out at your conferences? I know you were at one in Watford. Much UFO talk there?
Oh, a lot. Yes, I did a talk about the disclosure process that's been going on and the UAPTF report, what we talked about last time I was on the show. And I don't know. I kind of felt that it's just feel that this is now sort of ground to a halt a little bit. Even since I did my talk, there's been no news. Although maybe it's because I've been focusing an awful lot on my talk, but I've been checking the UFO Twitter and things like that, and it's I don't know if there's going to be another revelation in that respect, Kev, or not. It could be there'll be another leak at some point, or the UAPTF might publish something else. They don't have to publish anything now for 6 months till 6 months after the last publication. It might be another 5-page dossier or something. I don't know. But I know that John Greenwald of the Black Voles feels that it's going to go away. He feels the whole thing's just going to go away. I don't know.
I unfortunately probably tend to agree with him. There was another video came out, not very good for radio audience, but it's a tic-tac like object floating above the water.
Oh, I've not seen this.
And then it takes off and flies right at it.
What's this? I've not
came
seen
out the
this.
other day.
Where's right? It's from this.
Now, we don't know. It could easily be a fake. But It claims to be from July 13th this year, and like I say, it appears to be footage from some kind of camera and something on the water. But I don't know. I don't know if this is something that's been spoofed up. You don't know what you're looking at anymore half the time, you know?
Yeah, it's got CIA on there rather than US Navy.
Yeah.
It's the problem is, Kev. I mean, this is the problem. You never know.
Yeah.
When the Tic Tac footage first came out from the TTSA, everyone said, "Well, this could be just CGI. It could be something somebody concocted in their basement." And at the time, that was a perfectly valid suggestion. It was only as time went on and the researchers did their own digging. And I know that John Greenwald was sending off FOIAs like he always does to try and get more information. Eventually, there was like a publication. Yeah, no, this is real. This is U.S. Navy footage. That we could say, well, okay, then maybe that is the case, rather than it being just something that TTSA dreamed up or something they sent which they didn't check. However, this doesn't mean there's not more out there. I mean, the signal to noise ratio is really pretty appalling in this field, and for every really serious UFO video that I think might be real, there are dozens and dozens that are not. So there's a major cry wolf factor here. I suggest, I've not seen what you just showed me. I've not seen. I'll have a look at it, but I think until we can,
I'm leaning towards it being some kind of hoax, as opposed to I don't think it came out through Corbell or any of the known kind of UAP video posters. So I don't know, and it even says on it, new UAP video ? So I don't know.
So even the person putting it on Twitter is not sure. Well, that's good. He's put a question mark on there because I suppose we may find out more. We may find out more. I know that there's a lot of really good people who have more time and resources than I, and who are who've been really specialising in this field.
Well, what's kind of the latest with Kaz and Gaz down in Wales with the whole Pentich UFO? I'm still fascinated by that.
Right, yes. I've got to. The book is coming out soon. Again, I'm a bit behind with all this because of the things going on in my personal life with Gareth. But yes, the Pentich incident book is coming out soon. There's a website called the pentichincident.com. It's still in beta state. It's not completely finished. It's not finished design work, but there is some books. I've seen there's Kaz and Gary have posted. That's Gary Jones, her co-author, have posted the illustrations to the book, and they're really very well done indeed. These really great illustrations, which match the descriptions that she gave me and the other witness gave me, the guy who won't be named. And I'm looking forward very much to reading this book. I hope to interview Kaz and Gary it's pretty soon about the whole thing. And as soon as there's an update, I'll let you know, because I'd love to read the book and then talk about it on the show with you, because it's really, I think this is a highly significant case. I know not everyone agrees with me, but...
So what's some of the skeptics' problems with it? Because for me, I'm like you. I'm intrigued by it. So what's one of the... What do they say? How do they try and debunk it?
It's actually not very original, and the things they say are things skeptics say are actually very rarely original, I find. They say things like, well, firstly, there's the usual thing that personal attacks against Kaz and Gary. Oh, this is like a money-making scam or something, or they've lost their minds, or things like that. There's also the idea that this is simply just that it's a balloon or it's a drone. And things like that. They've said things like that. I spoke to a guy. I was even on a show with a guy once who said he's absolutely 100% certain that it's just a drone. And I said to him, you're the only person who's 100% sure of what it is. Even the witnesses aren't 100% sure, and you never saw it. He said, but it's a drone. It's all part of this exercise that was going on at the time. The police and the army and the RAF were doing some kind of exercise, and it was all just a part of that. However, what the witnesses describe, and I've spoken to another witness independently as well. He spoke to me privately, and the Kaz and Gary weren't there at the time. It's something very different. They describe a very large object. They describe it as being brown in color, with lights on it. Definitely a solid object, but enormous. because we know roughly its range from the witnesses. We know that it would have to be. I think they said it was 220 to 250 feet in size. And the illustration, I'll just check out. The illustrations are incredible.
We'll be back on the other side. One segment down, but lots more to come. The truth is out there, but can you handle it? Ben Emlyn-Jones is here. More from him after the break. Don't. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back with today's Kev Baker Show, right here on the home of the Kev Baker Show, but more importantly, your number one network. That's right, Truth Frequency Radio, TFRlive.com, the place where we can get guests like Ben Emlyn-Jones. Once a month he comes here. I remember hearing Ben on Enemy Within Radio, right here on Truth Frequency Radio. And I thought, I need to get that guy onto the show. I also heard him on a show with Christopher Everard. And that's what convinced me we need to get Ben in here. And since then, myself and Ben have been teaming up once a month. We've done countless shows now. We've even met in the real world. Imagine that. Something very rare for internet friends, Ben. But here we are, still with as many questions and still just as intrigued about all of the high strangeness out there. And we were talking about UFOs before the break. I'm going to stay on that because there's been another controversy.
Oh my God, another
ufology.
one.
Yeah, I mean, another
it's not as if they're in short supply, is it?
I know, it's like, see, for like a genre, a topic, it's got to be like the most drama that you see anywhere in a research community. This time, one of my favourite UFO stories. It really, really rubbed me up the wrong way when I started to hear the information being presented that maybe, I say maybe, let's keep a logical mind here, let's talk about it. Maybe the Travis Walton story isn't everything that we've been led to believe. Now, like I say, for me, if somebody had said, Kev, tell me one of the more compelling cases that you would put forward for evidence of ufology contact, I think Travis's case would have been well up there. But like I say, we're in a time of cancel culture now, so everything gets scrutinised and then re-scrutinised. I often encourage you listeners out there to revisit the topics that you really hold dear to your heart and you think they're absolutely true. And that's why I had to do with this case. And I don't know where I am now, but I want to get Ben's take on Travis Walton. What's going on? Tell me he didn't LARP it and fake it up, dude.
Well, what's going on, Kev, is pretty much what's been going on almost continuously since the event happened in November 1975. Travis was a lumberjack, and he and his friends were driving through woods one day, Arizona, USA, see the strange, brightly lit object. That's what the report goes. Travis got out of the car to have a look. He was hit by a beam of light and collapsed to the ground. The others panicked and they drove off. They abandoned him. I thought he was gone. It's a long story that what happened after that, but this became one of the most widely publicized UFO events in history. And indeed, it's when people mention UFOs, this very often comes about. It's had an enormous cultural impact. For example, there's a band, I believe they're from Scotland, actually, a pretty good sort of new wave rock band called Travis. And
Awesome.
They're really into UFOs, those guys. Yeah, good band. Yeah. And but of course, almost inevitably, people start asking questions and and scrutinizing what actually happened, the stories, the evidence, things like that, which they should do. This is actually
now,
quite...
hold on a second, Ben. Did rock? But now, did Travis? Is that where they got the name Travis from?
Yes, I do believe it.
Honestly, that's one of my favorite groups. But I'd never really looked into the name of it. But their music, wow, man.
They got a couple of UFO-themed songs. I mean,
Yeah.
Dave Hodrin did a talk about UFOs and music, and he mentioned Travis's rock video about UFOs. Yeah,
Is it
so this is major.
Fran Healy? Is that the name? Fran Healy?
So.
Yeah. Wow, dude, I'm gonna have to look more into that. Thank you for letting me know that, though, because
I'll find the
that
find the
makes them
video for
even
you.
cooler, dude. That makes them even cooler, you know?
It does, doesn't it? And I
Yeah.
mean, the video. I'll try and find the amazing video they did of UFOs. It was one of their. I can't remember what the song's title was, but now, of course, this is another issue with skeptics I have, because skeptics will say ufologists just believe everything. They just, when someone comes up with some ripping yarn and they just spin together some lean-to kind of story, ufologists go, "Oh wow, it's true, let's tell everyone." And of course, that's not the case at all. In fact, ufologists have an internal filter of evidence, which I think is far superior to the skeptic movement. The skeptics' response to the Travis Walton case has been that it's just been the usual thing. I mean, Philip Klass, for example, did some terrible investigation into this, if you could even call it that. Yet within the UFO community, there's been enormous amount of doubt about what happened to Travis as well. And the latest iteration of this actually it has received more attention than most, but it actually came from Mike Rogers. Now, Mike Rogers was the leader. He was the supervisor of the lumberjack team, and he was driving the car that night. And I came into this late. I heard about this. I couldn't really focus on it because I was preparing for my tour. So I was rehearsing my talk and everything like that and getting everything ready. When I managed to, I came into this class a little bit late. But when I did, I was really quite surprised, because I found that a lot of the primary source material had vanished. Mike Rogers, who had an argument with Travis over this, and they fell out for a while, I found that they'd now reconciled. They were friends again, and that Mike had removed the original accusation from his social media page. There was also Norio Hayakawa, a Japanese guy. He wrote an article about this, which I was going to read. I made a note of it, and I thought, I'll look at that when I get back from my tour. And because he'd written a big long article about this. Now, Norio, I thought, I respect this guy because he did a really good documentary about Area 51. Very, very good indeed. But when I went to click the link, it was dead. Norio had taken the article down. So I thought, what's going on here? So I started doing a bit of searching, and there was some secondary source material and from people like Jeremy Reese, the alien scientist, and Erica Lukes. She'd covered this, and their videos were still up. So I watched those videos. There's an interview with a guy called Ryan Gordon. Now he's a filmmaker who has been remaking Fire in the Sky. Fire in the Sky was the original documentary about Travis Walton, based on his book, which Travis never liked, because I don't know if you've seen the movie. It's all right until you get to the abduction, because once the abduction point comes up in this film, it completely deviates from reality and deviates from Travis's story. They turn into a kind of horror film. It's really quite scary. Where they shrink wrap him in this piece, and these horrible aliens are like torturing him. It's very frightening. They just thought that would make it a more successful movie, I think. But Travis says, hang on, that's not what happened. So this guy was going to do another adaptation of the book Fire in the Sky. Now, since then, this guy Ryan Gordon has come out saying, no, this doesn't make sense. I can't remember all the things he said because I watched the video a while ago, but he did a long interview with Erica Lukes. It's in several parts, and he describes how this was just a big scam. The whole thing was a scam. Now, that's not original. Like I said, people have been suggesting this ever since the event happened, and almost continuously someone has been saying this. Yeah, they said what he said is very different, though. He said that the actual location where the incident happened, and not everyone even agrees on where that is. It's like, the problem with woods is they get burnt down and things like that, and like Rendlesham Forest, and sometimes you lose. It's difficult to when something happens to know exactly where it is next time, because trees get burnt down and you don't know where they are. But he said that there's this thing he calls a fire tower, which is like a big tall platform on a gantry, on a big tower of metal. And at the top of that, there's like a little place. There's an observation post. So you go up there, you can actually see a long way above the treetops. And he says that It's called the Gentry Tower. There's actually a campsite just next to it, which I don't know if it was open at the time. It's there now. But he said that Travis and Mike Heston, what they did was they went up there and put some lights on, multicolored lights, and shone those over the woods to make it look really weird, like there was a UFO there. And then Travis went and hid in that tower. He actually climbed up to the top of the tower and hid in the little building at the top, little hut at the top, for a few days. And then he came down to Heber Overgaard, where he made his phone call 5 days later and said, "Look, I'm all right." And then they said, yeah, here we are. It's okay. He's survived, and he told his story because apparently he and Mike wanted to win the National Enquirer's prize. There was the National Enquirer newspaper. Well, it's kind of a bit of a trashy tabloid, really, in the United States.
It's like our old kind of Sunday Express or the Sunday Sport. Sorry, Sunday Sport, Daily
it's
Sport.
More like Sunday Sport, yeah. But apparently they were offering, I think, $1,000 or something, which is a lot more money in those days than it is now, for the best UFO story or something like that. And apparently what happened was that they wanted to win that prize money. And in the end, what happened was that there was some kind of plan sometime last year between Travis and Mike to do some kind of big reveal. They were going to do a massive mea culpa, rather like Ray Santilli and Gary Shoefield did over the alien autopsy in 2006. They were going to launch a movie and a book and make themselves really wealthy by confessing that they faked the whole thing all the way back all those years ago in 1975. And they had some kind of argument, and that was why they fell out. Now, I was reading through this, and what surprised me, because I suppose there's nothing particularly original about these kinds of accusations. I mean, Ryan Gordon did include a lot of new information that I've not heard before. I'd like to hear Travis's side of the story, obviously. But the response from the UFO community is really quite amazing, and I think it reveals an awful lot about the psychology or the culture within ufology. Suddenly, a lot of people came out and they said, "Well, that's it, case closed. Travis Walton's a liar. He made the whole thing up." There are people filling the comments section of Erica's videos with this, "Oh, well, I used to believe Travis Walton, but now I've watched this video, I don't believe him anymore." And I have kind of noticing, I've noticed this sort of thing before, Kev. I suppose it's to do with the way we feel about ourselves, because I mean, I personally, I don't want to fall for a hoax. I really don't. Who wants to fall for a hoax? I'd love to be the guy. Well, however the UFO story ends, if it ever ends, she probably won't. But however, suppose we get like a disclosure moment, I'd love to be the guy who could stand up and say, "I had it sussed the whole time. The rest of you were gullible, but I had the goods. I didn't fall for any of the hoaxes that other people fell for." I don't think it's unnatural or bad to feel that way. But that means that with some people, it gets to the point where they think, well, the art of living, therefore, for me, is to disbelieve everything. And that means the moment something is even suggested that it's a hoax, they just drop it and they run like it's a ticking time bomb. Pia Knudsen made this point as well, and she's noticed the same thing. They just drop it and they say, "Get away from it. It could be a hoax. It could be a hoax." We don't know. No, just get away from it. Because I suppose if it's proven to be a hoax, then you have fallen for the hoax. But if it's proven to be real, you could say, "Well, I thought it was a hoax, but obviously it's not." I suppose that's a bit different in terms of our ego from saying, "I thought it was real, but it turned out to be a hoax." Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, and when you end up believing nothing, that's exactly where the power people want you to believe, want you to be. Because if you believe in nothing, then they can get away with absolutely anything. And I must admit, when I first heard Jeremy and the guys talking about the Travis Walton case, first I was very, very triggered. I thought, "Oh, that's one of my favourite cases. You can't do that." But then I had to calm down and I had to think, well, let's think about this. I've never totally examined it in depth. And it kind of put me onto the fence. But then Travis done a question and answer session with Kurt Jimungal.
Yeah.
I thought he carried himself very well in that. So, I looked at it again. Interesting stuff. And like you say, I did see some of the information about how there was maybe an argument over money. Typical with
Yeah.
humans, right? And Mike and him falling out and then reconciling. So yeah, for me, I'm still erring on the side of I'm with Travis on this one, Team Travis. But always open to new info. You never know, Ben. You know.
Yeah. I personally do believe Travis Walton, not just from this, but because of all, I have looked into other researchers talking about him. I've met Travis. I've talked about him. What Ryan Gordon has presented, I believe, is not decisive at all. I think it deserves to be looked at. It deserves to be examined.
Yep.
It's like all evidence. It has a right to be talked about. Ryan Gordon has a right to his doubts, and Erica Lukes has a right to present them, as does Jeremy Riss as well. Yep. But I think like I said, I do see this mentality emerging from several people saying, let's just get away. If it could be a hoax, let's just get away from it. Let's just get away from it now.
Channel. You've heard me talking about Jeremy before. Really love the guy. Love a channel. But doesn't mean I agree with everything he comes out with. You know, he still doesn't mean because you like a channel, you have to always agree with somebody.
Exactly.
You can pick and choose, folks. It's what your discernment, what your critical thinking, what your research puts you there. And just because you find maybe a channel you like ends up disagreeing with you on a certain thing, don't go like totally dissing the whole channel and losing out on the stuff that you enjoyed beforehand. You know, we got to be more adult about this kind of thing, Ben, right?
That's it. Yeah, I think you do. Yeah, it's like, I mean, I'm quite open to people discussing this with me. In fact, Erica Lukes herself actually joined. I posted this in like the Aerial Phenomenon group, which is not a very big group on Facebook. Erica
Maybe
Lukes
that's
herself
better when you've got a smaller group. You can actually get some kind of conversation going, you know?
It's run by a Scottish lady actually called Suzanne, and she runs this. She's very, very passionate and dedicated to what she does.
Well, look at one of our favourite cases, and we were right in the smack bang in the middle of it. I don't know what's happening with it now, but Larry Warren, Rendlesham Forest, right? Total hate campaign. Different scenario from what Travis and that story's been through recently. But we know how these things work in the world of ufology, right?
And exactly, it was very educational for me actually what happened with Larry, because it all broke out the day. It was actually the weekend I met you up in Scotland, and we went to the Glasgow UFO Paranormal Festival, and it's very, very quickly I worked out that this was a fabrication. It was motivated by someone, a former friend with a personal grudge, but I detected the very, very same fear that suddenly emerged from the just simply the casting of doubt at all in itself from people, regardless of the evidence for pro or con. The casting of doubt itself in a sense tainted the entire story. It tainted Larry Warren, and I think the people who decided to carry out this hate campaign against Larry knew this. They knew that if they just say the right thing in the right place, most people will react as if it's true, even if it's not. They won't even look at it. They'll just think, well, if it is true, it's a kind of like you could call it the Pascal's wager of ufology. It might be true, it might not, but it's within my interest to assume it's true, even if it is not true. So that's what I found out with Larry, certainly with that. And you see the same thing with Travis Walton. I mean, there's so much more to the story, though. I mean, for example, the idea that Travis and the team were after the National Enquirer money is what goes right back to when it actually happened. This accusation was leveled at them straight away. However, what a lot of the skeptics don't ask is a very, very important question. Why did none of them accept Philip Klass's money then? Because Philip Klass actually offered them more to change their story. So the fact that they didn't accept Philip Klass's offer, which to me would be, if I was in a position where I wanted to make money out of this, I'd like trade them off against each other and see which one would
exactly.
pay me the most.
If you're a grifter, you're going to go to the highest bidder, right?
Yeah. You also get now the skeptics. The skeptics are very interesting. Going outside ufology to the skeptic movement, the skeptics have this thing I call the CTCS, the conveniently told confession story. Now, this means that the moment, and this has happened, the skeptics are latching onto, they latch onto a lot of things with this, including Travis Walton. The moment like Mike Heston came out, I don't know specifically, but you can bet they would have jumped on it and said, there we are. Someone's confessed. Now, when that happens, they go, right, we have a confession. That's the end of it. We know it's fake now because someone has confessed. Case closed. Now, What the skeptics don't realize is a confession is a claim too, and a confession can be falsified, and indeed they have been falsified. So there's several famous ones. For example, the Fox sisters, who started spiritualism. Their confession, I think, was fabricated. There was also the issue with the Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot movie. Do you remember the supposed confession of that?
Yeah. What do you make of that? Where do you sit on that video? What do you think?
Well, you see, if I took the skeptic line, I would say, well, because one of the guys, I can't remember which one it was, confessed that it was a hoax, therefore it's a hoax because we have a confession. Q, E, and D.
But what do you think? What do you think?
Well, yeah, well, the reason that Paul Vella, who's now sadly died as well, he went to the location because he researched this very, very carefully using very, very sophisticated image analysis footage software, and he went to the location, did some surveys, and he worked out, for example, the guy who confessed said, "Oh, that's my wife in a furry suit. I dressed her up in a furry suit, and she pretended to be Bigfoot." Well, Paul Vella worked out that figure, Patty, is 6 foot 7 feet tall. Is this woman, who's the wife of Gimlin or Patterson, 6 foot 7 feet tall? Really? Is she that big? Therefore, I mean, I call into question that confession. It's worth looking into the reasons why people might confess. The Fox sisters confessed to faking spiritualism because they're supposedly the two women who invented spiritualism. In 1848, they started the first spiritualist church. Yeah, later on, about 40 years later, they said they held their hands up and they said, "Oh, that's it. We made it up. Sorry." But Derren Brown actually brought this up in his séance. I don't know if it's a real show or not, whether it's acting, I don't know. But fact of the matter was, the Fox sisters were suffering very badly for what was going on in their lives because they got married, but their marriages were threatened. They were both had a drink problem. And it was the pressure of because they literally didn't have any privacy. Like a lot of celebrities complain about this. They had no personal life of their own because they were so famous. They were expected to tour around the world, appearing at theaters and things like that. People wouldn't leave them alone, and this affected their family lives and things like that. So what I suspect happened was they may have just got together and said, "Look, can we just roll this back? Let's just tell them we made it up, and then people go away and leave us alone, and we can have something of a normal life." So I would ask people, skeptics, if you hear the confession, it might be real, but it is a claim just like any other. Skeptics always insist on evidence for every claim. So why is it the skeptic, whenever they hear a confession, they accept it without any evidence?
It's kind of classic confirmation bias, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
Exactly.
You mentioned the whole Patterson film there. I've dropped an image over in the TFR chat room. I was looking at this earlier on today. I was going to make it one of the topics on my stream, but we never got around to it. But this here, it says, these Bigfoot sighting photos were reported on just recently this month by Jake Trumper, a radio host, and the sighting location was Whitewater Canyon in Bernard, Iowa. There's one of the. If I kind of zoom in, wait, I'll try and blow it up.
I'll go to your Twitter page. I'll go. You're on Twitter, Kev. Have you posted that on Twitter?
I'll share it on Twitter. There you go. I'll share it right now. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I don't know what to make of it. It definitely looks like something upright, big, and I don't know. Dude. It was one of the more interesting pictures I've seen recently, you know?
It's very much in the distance. I can see a human figure, or not a humanoid figure, on the top right.
There's one that I've blown it up there, kind of.
Yeah. It looks like Patty, the creature in the Patterson Gimlin film.
Doesn't it?
Very much so.
Yeah, very. That's what I thought when I first seen it.
It's a shame this person didn't have a telephoto lens.
I know.
Because it's so far away, you can't hardly see it.
And you can see when you look at the full photo, it looks like pretty high detail photo, but just not zoomed in.
Yeah.
Just not zoomed in.
It could have been, well, it's obviously like, I say lost opportunity. I mean, you can't expect everyone to carry like a telephoto lens around with them wherever they go, but if they had one,
well, it's
just bad luck. That's
like
bad luck,
my buddy
isn't it?
Clyde Lewis. He went squatching, as they call it. And the day when they were just getting ready to pack up and come home, he's sitting having a cup of coffee, and you better believe it. What wanders by? Sasquatch. Did he get a picture? Hell no. No. Last thing on his mind was actually grabbing a camera. And I've said that to people about the Loch Ness Monster as well. And we were talking about evidence a moment ago. and a confession or somebody's sighting, if there's no photographic evidence, it is what it is. It's
Yeah.
anecdotal. But just because something's anecdotal and they don't have the photos, the receipts, so to say, to back up what they're claiming, Ben, that for me doesn't take away from the story. Because you think about it, all of a sudden you're thrust into this moment with something unbelievable in front of your eyes. Maybe you don't think of your phone right away.
It's honestly, I can say from talking to people who've had these experiences, very often people don't. They don't go for their phone and film it like they would if like a rock star went by. Sometimes they're struck dumb. Sometimes it's even like there's some kind of effect of the phenomena itself. I mean, Jackie Tonks, the Squatcher, the Bigfoot person, said something like this. And indeed, others like talked about the Oz factor. Jenny Randall's is the Oz factor and things like that. It's almost like the very presence of this phenomenon. Maybe because it's just so weird.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's because it has some kind of the Bigfoot possibly uses infrasound or some kind of chemical, like a skunk, some kind of chemical emission to protect itself, which does cause confusion in nearby people. That is the reason why people don't automatically think about filming it. If someone tells you a story, they could either be lying or telling the truth. That's a fact of the matter. If they have photographs to back up their story, that's good. Doesn't mean they're telling the truth if they've got photos. A lot of people have photographed things, they've told their story, and they've told lies. A person telling a story without photographs, I don't think that's a reason to disbelieve their story on its own. I think sometimes we just have to live with being uncertain about things, because nearly everything in our subject matter is not 100% one thing or the other. There are some things which do turn out to be 100%.
You think of something like, we'll come back on the other side and we'll discuss this. Don't go anywhere. 1 hour down, 1 to go. For 2 of today's Kev Baker Show with Ben Emlyn-Jones. What a conversation we've had so far. We were talking about the state of ufology. We were talking about the skeptics, Travis Walton. We're going to stick on UFOs for now because somebody I've had on the show a number of times, and I'm waiting to hear back of when he's coming to come on next, is Dr. Brian Keating, astrophysicist. Now, we talk about his time down at the South Pole working on the BICEP telescope. We also talk about his book, Losing a Nobel Prize. Yes, losing it. Confirmation bias got in the way, folks. But he has also been invited to take part in something called the Galileo Project, which has been fronted by Avi Loeb. Now, Avi Loeb, I'm sure most of the audience will be well aware, is the Harvard professor who probably put a lot of his, put his career on the line when you think about it, when he came out and was very outspoken about an object called Oumuamua, our first interstellar visitor. Remember that thing? The cigar-shaped kind of graphic, the artist's impression that Avi Loeb said was no like any other object that had ever come through our solar system. In fact, he postulated that this might have been an ancient alien probe. Well, now, like I say, they're all taking part in something which they're calling the Galileo Project. And Ben, you've been writing about this. I'm excited, man. It's pretty cool.
This is really quite amazing, and they did a big launch of this Galileo project. They did like an hour-long video seminar all about it, and Avi Loeb was the leader. This is actually a part of his department at Harvard University, so it's being funded through Harvard, so it's not like it's not a private event. It's something that obviously he's persuaded the university authorities to take seriously. Well, what happened,
I can fill you in on a bit of this. What happened was his department came to him and said to him, Avi, you have got all of this money in an account to be using, and kind of shocked. Where did this come from? And it turns out an unnamed billionaire put a whole heap of money into Harvard for this project. Now, listen, this is speculation on my part, right? But I'm thinking it might be somebody by the name of Brandon Fugel, the guy that owns the Skinwalker, because I've seen him hanging around with Avi and a few of the other cats involved with this type of Galileo thing going on. It's speculation, but yes, through Harvard, but the money did come from outside. He said he had been
Right.
speaking to this person, and they were so impressed with what he had to say that they fronted a lot of money. And then there was more money came piling in on the back of it. In fact, I think it's with Brian Keating that he talks about all of this, where the money came from. You can find that over on Into the Impossible on YouTube, and you can hear Avi talking all about the money. But
Oh, I
aside from the
see.
money,
Right.
tell us what's happening. Tell the audience what it's all about, dude.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say Bob Bigelow, by the way.
It could, well, listen, hey, it could well be.
Yeah.
Why not? Why not, dude?
Yeah.
Why not? He's another one that's very interested in all this, you know?
Well, this is really quite remarkable because Professor Loeb is actually taking a different approach to most of the other people involved in the disclosure movement. Most people are looking towards the government for government files and things like that, and trying to declassify government secrets to do with UFO evidence. Avi Loeb, with the Galileo project, wants to develop his own system for gathering UFO evidence independently of government sources. Excuse me. So what he believes, for example, is that Oumuamua is not a one-off. He thinks it's likely that this is probably one of a number of objects that are continuously moving through the solar system. He said it's like if you see one ant crawling across your floor, you probably think it's not going to be alone. He's going to have his mates behind him. So what he wants to do is he doesn't want to miss the opportunity that was missed with Oumuamua. In other words, we just saw Oumuamua flying away. We didn't actually detect it until it was already flying away from the Earth. He wants now to use these funds to create a system using astronomical telescopes and other telescopes, proper telescopes for searching the sky, the kind of things that Wynne Keats uses. His very sophisticated cameras and things like that, to try and gather UFO evidence. He's called it the Galileo Project because of Galileo Galilei. Now, very famously, Galileo Galilei, he was a pioneer of science, and in 1633, the Pope ordered him to return to his home and never leave. And he spent the last 9 years of his life locked up in his house. Because one of the things he did was he actually told the Pope, he brought his telescope to the Vatican, and he said, look through the telescope at what I've discovered. Look through it. And the Pope wouldn't look through the telescope, even though he could have done so and seen that Galileo was wrong. He preferred not to look at the evidence and instead realized that this was a dogmatic thing, not a scientific thing. Now, what the implication, I think, is that scientific establishments are becoming like the 16th century church. It's actually they're becoming essentially religious and narrow-minded rather than open-minded and curious. Professor Loeb he's got into a lot of arguments with other people, and some of them have been really nasty to him. And one of them said, "Oh, I wish Oumuamua had just been a normal object. Why couldn't it just have been a normal object? Because then it would shut people like Loeb up." So I thought that's a very stupid, anti-intellectual attitude, quite frankly, Kev. I think it is. So I wish these guys luck. I really do. Professor Loeb has already really put his neck on the block. Like you say, he's risked his reputation and his career for this. He's a very senior figure. He's the head of astrophysics and astronomy. He's got a special title, his job title. It's I can't remember what it is, but he's at Harvard. Harvard University is the American equivalent of Oxford. It's a unique university, elite university. So this is a very high-level project here going on. It may be privately funded. I didn't realise it's privately funded, but the very fact that Harvard are allowing him to do this with their name on above the door, that's quite something.
What we'll do is we'll go and listen to 2 or 3 minutes of this. I'm sure this is at the very start where he talks about the money. Not that the money's an issue at all. But I find it interesting, that this is how it came about, because I've heard a lot of people saying, he was working with Yuri Milner, who was talking about sending the CubeSats up to Alpha Centauri, I think. And it was even Brian Keating when he was on my show. He said, if I'd been Avi, and he'd spoken to Avi about this, he wasn't like having a go at him, but he said, if I had a billionaire backer like Yuri Milner. And now that I'm talking about this, maybe Yuri Milner's the guy that put the money into Harvard. We don't know.
That's
But
amazing because Yuri Milner was into SETI and things like
yeah,
that because he did the Breakthrough Listen project.
That's right. And he was working with Stephen Hawking before he passed as well. So maybe he's the one that put the money in. Let's take a listen to this. And I think it's only in the first 3 minutes or so. It's not long. The actual video is an hour long and they get into the real details about this project. But like I say, for you audience members out there, never fear, because Dr. Brian Keating will be coming on in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, fingers crossed, to talk about this. Here we go.
Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Breaking news today has been announced from Harvard University, courtesy of none other than past guest and frequent friend of the show, Professor Avi Loeb. We're going to get into everything that's happened since the last time he was on the podcast when his wonderful book came out, Extraterrestrial. But today he is joining us to make a special announcement. And I actually have a connection to Avi about special announcements, and it has to do with an announcement he helped to make in 2014 on March 17th. I'll remember the day for the rest of my life. And it was about 400 or so years after, 450 years or so after Galileo Galilei, his birth. And that announcement was about a refracting telescope named Bicep 2. And Avi was a big part of that announcement. But today he's making an announcement also connected to Galileo Galilei. And I don't know much about it, but it is so exciting to hear the announcement that was just made live from CFA and elsewhere. Avi, first of all, how are you doing, my friend? And what is this big announcement? What does it have to do with the maestro, my hero, Galileo Galilei?
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be with you. The reason we chose the name Galileo for this project is because it has a potential of revolutionizing our worldview. I'm not saying we will definitely discover something as fundamental as Galileo discovered, which was basically the case that we might not be at the center of the universe. Prior to him, it was very flattering to the ego of a lot of people to believe that we are at the center. And it started with Aristotle and many other people. And then Galileo argued otherwise. And of course, the response was quite negative. And if he was living today, he would have been cancelled on social media. But instead, the philosophers at the time refused to look through his telescope. They basically argued that they know the answer without that, and put him in house arrest, and so that he would not communicate his message to a lot of people. And what that accomplished is that their ignorance was maintained for a while, but the Earth continued to move around the sun. And the lesson we learned from that is that looking through new telescopes is a good idea, rather than closing the curtains on our windows and saying, you know, the answer. So we might say we are the smartest in the universe. There is no smarter kid on our cosmic block, and close off the windows. But that doesn't remove any smarter kid from our neighborhood. It only maintains our ignorance. And in much the same spirit, what this project, the Galileo project, is proposing is to open the curtains on our windows and look out and search for evidence. Now, it might well be that we are the smartest kid on the block. There is nobody else, as a lot of my colleagues argue. And of course, that would be reassuring. It will enhance our self-esteem. But on the other hand, the answer may be different. And science is based on evidence. I should remind, I was asked in a forum a few weeks ago, how do I define an intelligent culture? And my definition was, it's a civilization that follows the guiding principles of science, namely cooperation and sharing of evidence-based knowledge. And there are two components to it. One is cooperation and sharing, which we don't practice very often along human history. If you see the most common...
I'm going to fast forward it just a little bit.
Reason that this project was announced is because there were two interesting events over the past 4 years or so. First, in October 2017, there was the first object discovered from outside the solar system in the vicinity of Earth, it was given the name Oumuamua, which means a scout in the Hawaiian language, because the telescope that discovered it was in Hawaii. And that's what my book was about. This object didn't look like a comet or an asteroid, nothing like we have seen before. And even the scientists that tried to explain it as a natural object had to invoke something that we've never seen before, like a hydrogen iceberg, nitrogen iceberg, or a cloud of dust particles. But this was the first one that we found. And clearly, it's not like the rocks that we often find in the solar system. So it could be of artificial origin. And then the Pentagon sent a report to Congress admitting that there are some objects in the sky a few weeks ago by a philosopher making arguments why Oumuamua is not likely to be a technological relic. And I look at it and I say, we should have...
No, I'm not going to play anymore. I was just wasting time with Ben here, but I will find it for Ben during the next break or so. But I think I'm quite excited about this one, Ben. I must admit.
I really am too, yeah.
Yeah. And on top of that, I was looking at something yesterday. I don't have the story to hand, but it was over 30,000 members of a recognised aviation authority over, I think it's a worldwide kind of group. But they're calling for further investigation into the whole UFO topic on the premise of safety for commercial jets that are flying around. So we're seeing on the back of the UAP program that he mentioned there, the Pentagon coming out with, we're starting to see more and more kind of mainstream investigation into the kind of topics we talk about.
Really, yes. There's been a distinct shift in attitude and on a very, very deep cultural level towards UFOs. It's come about in many different ways, and it's taken many different forms. It seems to have been, so it's not just one area among one group of people. It seems to be worldwide and among all kinds of people. It's as if something of the taboo of discussing this subject has gone. Ever since 2017, actually, the whole official ridicule and denial method changed. As we've talked about several times on this show, it completely transformed into something else. This doesn't mean we're necessarily going to get everything we hear from now on is going to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. But it is very interesting that this tidal shift happened. And the result is from people like Avi Loeb, who is a guy who's I've got a lot of respect for. I think he's done something amazing. I do wonder if he would be heard as widely as he has been heard had this tidal shift not occurred. I read his book, actually. His book, Extraterrestrial, is very well worth reading. It goes into a lot of issues to do with his own life and his own ideas, and as well as the whole Oumuamua thing. But it is, in a sense, something I think, if it happened before 2017, would be totally heretical. Yet now he's in a position where he gets some nastiness in the Zoom calls and things like that from other scientists. They have a go at him a little bit, but really, it's nothing compared to what would have happened before. It's now, you can't. Now we've got major aviation organizations and pilots unions and things like that coming out and saying we need more talk about this. All this has to have some kind of an effect in the long run, Kev. As I was saying earlier on, it feels like the subject has stagnated a little bit. I sense there's been no new news, I think, since June. I don't think we should give up, because there's been gaps like this before in this whole process, where nothing much happens for a long time, including all of 2018. Nothing really happened after the December 2017 thing. And I actually said during 2018, I think it's just going to go away. It's been sidelined now. Yet look what happened the following year. All kinds of things came out of the closet. So obviously, I hope that process will continue. I hope the momentum has not gone. We'll find out sooner or later. But I think if academics of the level of Avi Loeb are involved, and people funding it, very, very wealthy people are funding it, so it has that financial resource. I mean, there's a whole number of people now. I mean, Brandon Fugel, of course, and Bob Bigelow are very, they're kind of our George Soros. They are very much on our side. Now, Yuri Milner, I never thought would be, because he was into SETI. Now, people who are into SETI tend to have a very low opinion of ufology.
Yeah.
It's almost like I've got an entire presentation on that actually, where I describe the difference between the two and how they both emerged. But if someone has, in a sense, defected and crossed over the Iron Curtain from SETI into ufology, that's quite something. I think that's quite significant. If Yuri Milner is actually now into ufology, that's going to be highly significant, because the whole point of SETI is, yes, they're aliens, but then you're searching for them in distant stars. It kind of defeats the purpose if the things you're looking for are right here on Earth with us already, and they found us before we found them. This is why Carl Sagan was very anti-UFO. Most others, Seth Shostak just laughs at the whole idea of UFOs. We've got what's his name, Tyson, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's been scoffing at the whole thing.
But your favourite Brian Cox. I know you love Brian Cox, right? You'll love that guy. You've got posters of him, haven't you?
I adore him. I'm his biggest fan. Yes.
He should have stuck to the drumming for D Ream, right? Because things can only get better.
Oh, every time I think of that silky black hair, that shiny white teeth, I go all gooey.
He's brutal, isn't he?
He did it. He did like an entire. I actually watched all of it. Actually, it was an episode of a series where he talked about SETI and extraterrestrial life, things like that. He mentions UFOs in just one single scene of that particular documentary, and he just sort of he was very as dismissive as he always is. He really will. So, unfortunately, of course, it's not universal. As I said, Avi Loeb has received a lot of opposition. He hasn't backed down. He hasn't gone away and gone back to his normal life. I think he really believes in this. The book is written with a lot of passion. You can see he's really put all his heart and soul into this book.
I'm going to get that book. It's one of the books I do actually want to check out. And I'd imagine, Ben, hopefully this will give confidence maybe to other scientists out there. We've got an interest in this topic, but like we say, you don't want to put it all on the line coming out as the UFO guy, right?
I think Loeb and people like him are trailblazers.
It's like Brian Keating. I mean, people talk about science being very close-minded and things. But the reason he blows me away is when we talk to him, he talks about the Big Bang, but he talks about how it's just one of many theories as to how it got going. It could be anything. And it really made me look at scientists in a different way, because we often kind of criticize them for not being open-minded, exploring new ideas. But then there's another guy we used to get on, Brendan Drackler. I'll need to get in contact with him again. And he would talk about, how dark matter, dark energy, just rubbish made up to make up the equations. And it was really refreshing to hear proper scientists talking about the kind of woo that we get into, alternative ideas,
It's funny but scientists do this sort of thing. They make things up off the top of their heads. They speculate more than we do. For example, the dark energy thing is just simply it's very similar to Einstein's cosmological constant, because Einstein was in a bit of a pickle because he was trying to explain some way in which the universe worked. He couldn't think of it. So he said, there must be something out there producing this effect. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to call it the cosmological constant. And he held on to this theory for a long time until he looked through the telescope of Edwin Hubble and realized that everything was moving apart. So he didn't need it because he thought the universe was static. He didn't realize there was like a expansion. Now they've measured the cosmic expansion. They've realized it can't simply be a leftover of the Big Bang. It's actually accelerating. So what's making it accelerate? Oh, I know. It's dark energy. So scientists are human like the rest of us. I mean, they are driven by the same forces that drive us, and that leads them into cowardice and dishonesty as much as it does anyone else. They suffer from failure of nerve, failure of the imagination. They're not perfect. They sometimes cave in over some things, but I think a good example, they are really, really, I think everyone loves a good example. So what they'll do is, I think what we'll see with Avi Loeb, because he is a trailblazer, he's going where no others have dared tread before. Yet he's not going to be alone, because when people see him do it, they're going to try it themselves. They're going to try doing things that they never dared doing themselves because he has dared. And you can see this everywhere. You're going to see this within politics, as with Paul Hellyer. You're going to see it within aviation, as indeed this organization you've told about. There's people like Ray Bowyer, but Ray Bowyer was an airline pilot who spoke out about his UFO experience, and he's okay. They kept flying. They didn't ground him. It wasn't like that scene in the beginning of Close Encounters where they say, "Do you want to report a UFO?" Oh, no, negative.
Yeah. And just to
so-
back up what I was saying there, in case people are thinking, oh, there's that Baker throwing things in, nothing to back it up. This comes from the debrief.org, the world's largest association of aerospace and aeronautical engineers. Join the call for scientific inquiry of UFOs. And it says, since the DoD released the UAP report, science-minded groups like the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, and Harvard University's Galileo project, blah, 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 now the world's largest association of aeronautical and aerospace engineers, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, boasting an active membership of nearly 30,000 aerospace industry specialists, have joined the same push to study unidentified aerial phenomenon. I think that's really significant, Ben.
Excuse me, 30,000 people is a large town.
Yeah, that's a group that matters.
Yeah.
You know,
And they, as you say, they are aeronautical engineers. They're people like Hellier. Hellier was an engineer who built aircraft during World War II. I think this cannot go on. This process, and you see, I was just saying earlier on, I thought things were stagnating because there's been nothing more from the UAPTF. But even within this period where they're all quiet, look what's happening alongside it.
Yep.
This has to produce results. This kind of attitude among so many people who you can't just dismiss in the way they may well dismiss you and I, is going to end up with some kind of cultural effect. It really is. There's going to be some kind of 100th monkey point, very close, if not over. If not, we're over it now with this sort of thing. So I'm really encouraged by this, Kev. I really am.
Yeah, just a quote.
I wish
here.
them luck.
Yeah, it says, we need everyone's help on this. And we just do it in a way that is transparent, said former US Navy pilot Ryan Graves, one of 6 panelists to speak at the safety session and a first-hand witness to the UAP phenomenon. Because at the end of the day, you know, like I said, very pragmatically, you know, we're flying around objects out there at hundreds of miles per hour with people's families on board. It's just a matter of time, frankly, before we have a collision. I'm surprised it hasn't happened already.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. Yep.
There's been several instances actually where airline pilots have reported they have to take evasive manoeuvres when there's an unknown object nearby.
Famous one in Japan, right? There's a famous one from Japan where the pilot came up close and personal. I was watching that on a documentary on the History Channel just the other day. That's why it's fresh, folks. I'm not like Ben.
Yeah.
Ben is like the library of woo. He can call it all back in a heartbeat. We'll be back. One more segment to go with Ben Emlyn-Jones. It's with heavy heart that I have to say we're in the final segment of today's show. But never fear, there's more live radio right around the corner after today's Kev Baker Show on Truth Frequency Radio. And don't forget, tomorrow we are going to have a new guest on the show. We are going to be joined by a gentleman that is called Vincent Richardson. Ben, you'll like this. We're going to be talking about pale crawlers, flying humanoids, and more creepy
my kind of
cryptids.
guy.
Yes, he's currently helping to co-author and research a book with Lon Strickler, the man behind the Phantoms and Monsters blog. And we kind of connected in one of the chats. A couple of times we've spoken in the chats, but I'll get your take on this. And you might know where this term actually comes from originally. You hear people talking about ET, extraterrestrials, a lot. But what caught my eye about Vincent was he was saying, think more along the lines of ultra-terrestrials, as in interdimensional, and it was just another way of looking at it. I hadn't heard that term before, but Vincent and Lon went on to explain how this was something, a term that was coined way back in the day. The name escapes me now, but ultra-terrestrials, I like that name, dude.
It's a good name. I think it was coined by JJ and Desiree Hurtak. Or
There you go. That rings a bell. Yes.
Yes,
What,
I'm
see,
bursting
what
my
did I say
anorak
on the
again.
way out? What did I say on the way out from the last break? This guy just calls it up in his mind. It's like a Rolodex of woo. Love it,
I'm a
dude.
total anorak. I'm such an anorak. But it's the whole term ultra-terrestrial has sometimes been applied to different meanings. For example, it's been applied to refer to intelligent creatures, other intelligent creatures on the planet Earth that originate on planet Earth. And some people claim that aliens, what we call aliens, are actually creatures that live here with us. They may come from under the sea, but they actually live on Earth with us, and they originate on planet Earth. And indeed, I don't think all, but it's possible that some what we call aliens might actually be that.
Well, what do you make of this kind of the pale crawlers or the rake type entity? And the reason I bring it up is because Stan Gordon and Lon Strickler, both, when you combine their research time together, it's over 100 years, dude. It's mind-blowing. But they've had increased reports of these very lethargic, kind of emaciated type entities creeping around, lurching around. What say you to the rake, man?
I've heard of things like that. I didn't know they were called that. I had not heard the term before, but I've heard of creatures like that, definitely. Pardon me.
They look like something that could have came from down below, my speculation.
They certainly look very frightening. I mean, they're rather like they remind me a bit of the horrible creatures in the film The Descent, which is actually, you've not seen that before. It's very, very good. It's frightening about creatures living in caves, which is it's not an original idea, but it's actually a very, very good movie, a very good interpretation of the mystery and the horror of weird creatures in caves. But yes, there are reports from people. Usually, they don't hang around very long to see them. They usually just get a glimpse of it and they bolt like frightened rabbits, which is understandable. Of very frightening beings that appear sort of semi-human. Maybe the term ultra-terrestrial in this case refers to something interdimensional rather than something physical that lives on the Earth with us. I don't know what the Hurtaks meant by that term, but yeah, look at that there. That is something that I wouldn't want to run into in a dark alley at night.
Yellow glowing eyes is a very common description, as opposed to the Mothman with the reddish kind of hue to the eyes.
Ironically, when it comes to a dark alley at night, one of the best cases of this, someone was actually in a dark alley at night, where a group of young boys actually ran into a creature like this. Jaime Maussan actually covered this in detail in Mexico. But yeah, this is not like something connected with UFOs necessarily. These are things that just appear. They just appear out of nowhere, and they very often you don't expect them. People said, no, it was just, everything was normal. Then suddenly this thing was just there in front of me. And I excremented my pants basically and bolted. And it's one of the more alarming elements of the paranormal, I think. Kev, really is.
It's I've often said this is the one that really kind of disturbs me the most, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know why, dude. There's just something about it. I don't know.
It looks like it could be that these are malevolent things from other worlds. I mean, you yourself have been investigating things like this, like you went to Boleskine House. Uh-huh. There are things coming through from other worlds that seem to have some purpose with us, and they're not always friendly, they're not always nice, and some of them seem to have some kind of exploitative or even malevolent intention towards humans on this planet.
Well, you mentioned a portal possibility there. I definitely think that there's one or something like that around Boleskine. Again, we're using our language to try and describe something that I think we don't even have words for at this point. But I also think that these ancient megalithic stone sites, not all of them, but I think some of them are very akin to what goes on at Boleskine. It's almost a natural location, maybe a conjunction of ley lines, and then you put the stones on top, and perhaps that opens portals. I don't know. But one of our most infamous stone circles in the UK has to be Stonehenge. And you've been writing about Stonehenge as well, Ben, haven't you? What's happening with
Yeah.
tunnels under Stonehenge? Oh.
So we're not going to talk about UFOs for the entire program this
No,
time.
not this time. Not this time. I thought we better change gears. You know.
We're lucky to live in a country on an island which has a massively rich prehistoric culture. We had the remains in terms of stone monuments. Britain is unrivaled throughout the entire world in the depth and complexity of its prehistoric legacy in terms of stone monuments. Stonehenge is by far the most famous of these, but it's not the only one. Now, these are World Heritage Sites. They're protected by law. Now, the culture that produced them lived a long time ago. I'm talking over 4,000 years ago. Stonehenge was built in several phases, actually, over a very long period of time. And there's evidence that there were wooden structures there 10,000 years ago. So it's been used for that purpose for a very long time. And maybe this has got something to do with ley lines and energy, spiritual energy. It could have something to do with that. There are so many of these sites all over the country, and researching them, there's some people who really, really work hard at researching. They specialize in the way that I don't. You and I are quite generalized. There's some people who dedicate their entire lives to researching these. For example, Maria Wheatley.
Yeah, I was thinking of her and Hugh Newman, another one.
Yeah, Hugh Newman, Julian Cope, and people like that. Maria actually did talks for the Basis Project and for the Watford UFO Academy about this particular subject, because Maria's discovered that there was an earlier temple at Stonehenge which is actually based on the moon and not the sun. And not only that, but they were like long-skulled people as well, which is that's a huge subject there. But I do wonder exactly how much the modern world knows about this, including people who are involved in possibly the dark arts in the modern world, in terms of people very senior who are involved in Freemasonry and things like that. But there was a plan to build a tunnel underneath Stonehenge. I don't know if you'd heard about that. It was proposed several years ago. Yeah. But the A303, the big main road that goes by Stonehenge, if you've ever driven along it, you'll know that it's actually a nightmarish road. It regularly gets overcrowded and congested. And there was talk, well, what they could do is they could create a tunnel to try and alleviate some of that congestion. And strangely enough, the tunnel they proposed went very close, almost directly underneath the Stonehenge monument. And this was not going to be a very deep tunnel either. It was not going to be an average depth of a tunnel. So its top would be about 20 feet below the ground. And there was a lot of fuss about this because people said, well, this could have an impact on this particular site. It could cause damage. They could threaten archaeological digs and things like that. And there's all kinds. I can't remember all the details, but I know there's a big campaign against the tunnel. Or they weren't against. They didn't want to stop it. They understand that the A303 needs to be sorted out. It's a bad road, but what they want to do is have a tunnel that went in a different direction away from this historical site. Now, the good news is, the High Court has recently ruled that the original tunnel plan is wrong. So the original tunnel is now scrapped. Whether they'll go back to the drawing board and select one of the other plans, which takes the tunnel further away. It'll cost a lot more money, but it'll avoid this sacred site. It just makes me think about the past, Kevin, about what was going on, because these are people who left no written records. We don't know even what language they spoke. They may have spoken a Vasconic language, something similar to Basque. We don't know. We know sort of what they look like because they left their bones behind them, and some of their faces have been reconstructed and things like that. It appears that most people in Britain today are related to these people. They are we are their descendants, basically. But there are certain bones that have been discovered, and this is a research project that Maria has been involved in. She's written a book about this, which are very, very different. They have a different shaped skull. It's very similar to the Paracas skulls you might have heard about.
Yeah, we do a lot of shows with the guys from down under. So when it comes to different shaped skulls, boy, oh boy, yeah, we've been looking at ones that go very much, not a forehead like ours, but almost directly sweeps back. and it's almost twice the size of a human skull. And what's interesting about that is it's buried alongside other types of hominids within a stone's throw down in Australia, which suggests that there was intermingling going on in the past as well. And you look at that Denisovan cave in Siberia, where they said it was just a couple of Denisovans to begin with. Well, now I think there's like 6 or 7 types of hominids that they've found, all living together in and out that cave at different periods as well. And like you say, Ben, this is something we explore a lot. Our true story, the true story of our past, all the different cycles. Who knows how many times we have risen and fallen, you know? But trying to piece this back together, it's almost as if there's something in our DNA. So I don't even know if ancestral DNA is a thing or not, right? But it's like there's something inside us that recognizes these older times, you know, that these monuments. There's something really pulls me and so many others to this topic. It's fascinating.
They have a really obscure fascination, and I understand it. Having visited these places, there is a strange energy to them.
Yeah.
Stonehenge is actually not my favourite. Avebury I much prefer, but there's no doubt that we have been lied to about our past, both in recent history, but also in the distant past in terms of paleontology. That is our origins as a species. For example, we're told, for example, there was Lucy, the Australopithecus, which eventually became Homo erectus, which then went on to become the Neanderthal man, which eventually became humans as we know us today. But when I learnt all this at school, I never found out about any long-skulled people. No one ever mentioned this. And it turns out that hardly anyone talks about this. Maria is one of the few people to investigate this, possibly because she's outside academia, so she doesn't have the pressures that people like Avi Loeb have been having to fight back against. But they've been dug up, they've been registered, these finds. They've been found all over the world, including in areas around Stonehenge. And they are different. They're slightly shorter than us. They have larger heads, which are a different shape. Now, when the Paracas skulls first appeared in South America, everyone said, "Oh, it's just it's cradle boarding. They've been artificially shaped." Because it's true that the native peoples used to do that. Newborn babies would have their head wrapped up, so the skull went into a particular shape as it grew. But the Paracas skulls, that wasn't done. The Paracas skulls grew like that. They were natural like that. That's the natural shape of the head. And the weird thing is that they were being found in Britain. The archaeologists who found them, or the paleontologists, dug them up, sent them off to be stored and to be analysed. They were actually kept in the science area of Oxford University, not far from where I am. Maria went to see them she wanted to see them, and she got permission to view them. She had to sign a book to say that she'd looked at them. She looked at the date above the one where she signed, and it was 1928. That's the last time anyone even looked at these things. That's how much time has been lost in this research project. And it's almost like there was a mental barrier, blinkers. Now, Richard Thompson and Michael Cremo talk about this in their book Forbidden Archaeology. If you ever read it, well, it's quite a task to read the whole thing because it's like about 1,700 pages long. But it gives numerous examples of anomalies within archaeology, which are just everywhere. They're all over the place. But the official sources will not recognize that they exist. This includes things such as dinosaur bones with bullets in them. It includes different types of humans, modern humans living way millions of years before than they should have. They're sharing the world with people like Lucy, or creatures like Lucy. And ancient civilizations. You mentioned the rise and fall of various cultures. We're told that our civilization we're told that human history is linear. It goes from a primitive, so ape-like source, where the apes eventually walked upright and they eventually became us. And we then we lived primitive lives as Stone Age people. And then gradually we built civilization until we became what we are today. So we are the end result of a linear process. But the research that's going on indicates that's not true. What happens is exactly what you said.
Yeah, we've been looking at the Denisovans making jewelry, evidence of almost plumbing in some of the places where they've kind of been, and then one of the things that's kind of really blowing me away is when you look at the Amazonian people and studies out there showing that they actually contain Aboriginal DNA, Australian Aboriginal DNA, which suggests a transfer out of Australia to South America, some kind of crossing anyway. Again, doesn't fit with what we're told, Ben. Doesn't fit with that official narrative.
Exactly. They crossed over the Pacific Ocean, especially halfway around the world, on what they only had like logs and floating logs and things like that.
You'll need to get Stephen and Evan on to talk about out of Australia theory. You would love it. Very compelling.
It's great. Nexus is written about this because they're Australian based. That's a great magazine. That it's like we have. I've literally. It's quite funny actually because I've been just watching a video about out of place artifacts, and I've just downloaded the original source document, which is actually it's actually in a very very old. It's a very old PDF. It's a PDF of a very old 19th century scientific journal, which mentions that some people digging, I think they were prospectors, and they found deep, I think it was more than 60 feet underground, they found the remains of stone structures that had been built. Now, the depth they were found, the rock strata they were found in, indicates that they must have been millions of years old. There's been
That's very similar to, I think it was Michael Tellinger I heard telling the story, but when they were doing modern mines in South Africa, they would often have cave-ins, and the cave-in would reveal an ancient mine that had been dug, like you say, potentially millions of years ago. And not only that, Ben, but very, very well constructed, showing that there must have been some kind of technology going on as well, you know?
Yep, this is the American Journal of Science and Arts, Volume 2, Number 2, November 1820. It's very old. It's more than 200 years old. And I haven't actually found the actual page. It's a PDF like scanning of it. I haven't found the actual page where they say this. But they discovered that also what looks like coins were found at this location. And you mentioned like in South Africa, another thing was found in South Africa. And as you said, this is like a really rich area because possibly because there are so many mines in South Africa, gold, diamonds. It's where they all come from. But they found someone found a lump of coal with a gold chain in it, and they broke it open basically because it went through they broke it they were going to put it in sacks and sell it to people for their fires and things, and they found a gold chain in this lump of coal. And coal, as you know, is very old. It's extremely old. It's formed billions or several billion years ago. On seabeds and things like that. It's made out of the bodies of microscopic organisms and things like that. There was a gold chain embedded in this lump of coal. I mean, what the hell? You know, what created it? Presumably, was it a creature? Was it aliens, or was it something that lived on the Earth? An intelligent species lived on the Earth.
Like I say, dude.
Way back then.
Yeah, who knows how many times we talk about Atlantis. One occasion when allegedly they had high technology, but maybe in the times of Atlantis they talked about Woo-land. Maybe they talked about a place that had been lost, a time forgotten.
Oh, wow.
You know, you never know what stories were being told in Atlantis. You know, maybe they had maybe they knew of a cycle that had risen and fallen. You know, remnants here and there. Ben, Loch Ness, for example, when you look at Marty Klein, who was the inventor of side sonar scanners that went on to find the Titanic. When he done Loch Ness, towards the Inverness end, there's stone circles. Now, you're talking about 70 foot underwater. So at some point, that was 70 foot lower. Obviously, because I mean, I would imagine it was built when that was dry land. No, they went underwater to do it. So it shows that there's so much, dude, so much down there.
Well, I think we discussed on a previous show about Loch Ness being originally a glacial lake. Yeah. Because it was during the Ice Age, when all of northern Britain was covered by an ice cap, Loch Ness was liquid. So it was rather like Lake Vostok is beneath the Antarctica today. But you know, when you're going back so many thousands of years and more thousands of years before the Ice Age and things like that. I mean, the idea that there was the pre-Atlantean civilization goes back to Churchward, you know, the explorer and the author who wrote about Mu or Lemuria, which is just very, very similar. and that if you're talking about something even older than the things Graham Hancock is digging up.
Now, what you're looking
about
at there is this alleged circle, and there was other markers as well involved, but this was one of the best photos that I could find, and you can tell by looking at it, the rounded edges. This is actually taken from a strip of, remember the old film strip?
Yeah.
That's what it's actually taken from, 1975. 1975, and yeah, exactly. Who knows what's going on?
I think it's quite likely that we're living in, which is what the evidence we see is exactly what we would see if we lived in a cyclical civilization. In other words, we did go through a rising and falling of civilization, and there were major catastrophes which led to us returning to barbarism and beginning again as children, as Plato talks about in Atlantis. If that is the case, then we're not living in a period of linear progression. But funny enough, there's a political angle to this, obviously, because based on the experience of researchers like Maria Wheatley and Richard Thompson and Michael Cramo, somebody quite important, somebody powerful in this world doesn't want us to know this. They want us to see progression as a linear fashion. We go from primitive states into the modern civilization. It's only ever happened once on this earth. It's a completely one-way street, and that's it. There's no alternatives permitted. It's rather like the UFO cover-up. Somebody doesn't want us to know the truth. It could be for psychological and cultural reasons, or maybe there's other reasons that I haven't thought of. But there is a cover-up, Kev. Absolutely no doubt about it.
As Stephen Strong put it, it's possibly the biggest, most criminal cover-up of our entire history. It truly is. And one headline I covered yesterday on a stream, Secrets of Scotland's Lost Atlantis after 200 mysterious objects found in the North Sea. Now, it's not Atlantis, folks, but it's a underwater world named Doggerland. And this was when we had land that stretched from the Channel Islands over to Holland, to Denmark, back to Scotland. Not the way we recognise the map today. Very active area, livestock on it, communities, settlements. And again, just off the coast of Scotland now, covered by the North Sea. It's amazing how many layers of history are literally all out there to be found, Ben. And it just, we'll never get the full story. I don't think we'll get that. I'll never lose interest. I'll never lose the thirst. Keep digging, keep looking, dude. Keep searching for that truth, because like I called tonight's show with you, the truth is out there somewhere. It's just getting to it, you know.
Yeah. If this is suppression, I don't think it's just.
No, absolutely, man.
It's not just people being silly, as some people are. There is, and you say you called it a crime, and it is a crime. It's a crime it's a fraud. It's an act of fraud for us to be separated from our true past as a species, our true natural history. I think we have a right to be told the truth, to have honesty in science, so we can know who we are, where we came from, what we as a creature on this earth are here for. We can't know what we're here for till we knew where we come from. Someone wants us to have a particular image of where we came from, so that they, for whatever reason, for political reasons, probably the same people who want us to believe that the Earth is just like a little pale blue dot in a little oasis of life in this infinite cosmic desert, and there's no such things as aliens, and we're all there is in town. Probably the same people are behind both cover-ups, Kev.
And we're not having it anymore because we're mad as hell. That's right. Ben Emlyn-Jones. Ben, tell people where to find the website, how to keep up to date with you.
If anyone wants to know anything more about me, just go to Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. If you put that in, you'll find it. Hapanwo, yes. And there's all kinds of websites. I've got a YouTube channel, and I've got I do a radio show like Kev. And I've written the books, as Kev said earlier, Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure. If you like this program, you'll love that book and its sequels.
We all love Ben Emlyn-Jones. Wherever you are, make it TFR. More from Ben next month. More coming up after the break on your number one network, Truth Frequency Radio. Again, wherever you are, make it TFR and then touch that dial.